massacre, but we'll get to that in a second. We've seen that, you know, the left only succeeds when it does get people to recant, when it forces people to apologize, because as soon as you refuse to apologize, they completely lose their power. So is this how we win, you know, by leaving them no targets to feed on but each other?
Exactly. It's the grievance industry is fueled by capitulation. Apologies is their gasoline. And the less you capitulate, the less power they have. I'm reminded of Sarah Silverman, where she had some joke that involved the word chinks, where she said, I wrote I hate chinks, and then to get out of jury duty, I crossed it out and I wrote I love chinks. The American Asian Society demanded an apology, and she accused them of going pee-pee in her Coke. Boom. We never heard from them again. That was the end of that. But when you apologize, like Brett Ratner, he said, rehearsals are for fags at a Q&A for his movie Tower House. He apologized profusely for that. He was then forced to go on an apology tour of all of America. And I noticed this when I got in trouble for saying that if you have a sex change, you're not a woman. I refused to apologize, right? And what I did was, it's the same as locking these rats in a room. When they have no food, they end up cannibalizing each other. So I was sort of running up the mountain away from these nuts, these mentally ill homosexuals. And I noticed that when I stopped reacting to them, and by the way, reacting, I was just insulting. I never apologized. They started cannibalizing each other. Jim Goad calls it the cannibalization of the left. And they started, one of them told another one, I hope you drink bleach and die, and was kicked out of Out magazine or something like that. So the secret to this problem is to stop giving them power. And the way you stop giving them power is you stop apologizing, you stop being ashamed, and you start being proud. We should be as proud as these pedophiles.
Well, I mean, we need to reassert these beliefs, these principles back into the mainstream, because, I mean, if we've got our own media platforms, you know, we're responsible to nobody, basically. We're not Kurt Schilling. We're not going to get fired by some big network. So we can basically say what we want. But the fear is with people who have just got regular jobs, like, you know, the individual I mentioned earlier. So it's about setting that example, isn't it? It's about not apologizing, not flouncing, not doing, you know, I'd respect Stephen Fry in many ways, but he just quit Twitter. He basically flounced. That was the wrong thing to do. We need to reassert that our beliefs are part of the mainstream. They're completely sensible, logical. They shouldn't be decried as hate speech or triggering or insulting, because then that gives people in the regular working world more confidence to espouse the same beliefs, correct?
Exactly. And I get a lot of trouble from the far right with this. I'm against anonymity. You use your real name. I use my real name. If people think we're faking or lying, go look at our body of work for decades. You should get in trouble. You should get fired. You should become a pariah, because they can't arrest us all. What they're doing right now is they're isolating the few brave ones and vilifying us and getting us fired and making us into lepers. Well, we all have to become lepers, and then all of a sudden they become the lepers, because we know they're a minority. They're just a very loud, very shrill minority, and they're dominating the majority by, quite frankly, being braver than us. We have to stand up to them and say, my name is Gavin McInnes. I am not ashamed of being a white male, and I think your behavior is disgusting.
And it's interesting, there was this big social network that was about to launch about a month or two ago, where they would shame people. They would link their online comments with their employment, their jobs. Yes. That was actually shot down. Yeah, they fed on each other, didn't they? The SJWs got that shut down because it would have just created more bullying. We'll talk about it after the break with Gavin McInnes on The Alex Jones Show. KingNews@Infowars.com. Don't go away. We'll be right back. We are back. It's The Alex Jones Show live with our guest, Gavin McInnes, CompoundMedia.com, and, of course, The Rebel Media. Now, I want to talk about this because I just read this interview actually earlier today before I even knew that I was going to interview Gavin. Gavin, you did another interview with Jesse Hughes, who, of course, is the Eagles of Death metal singer who was playing at the Bataclan Theatre in Paris during the Paris massacre. Back in March, he came out in this Rolling Stone interview. He was basically forced to back down over his comments about what he witnessed immediately before the attack, because they had the usual mob outrage meltdown. he, at the time, basically said that there was some indication the security, the Muslims working in the security at the theater, may have had some foreknowledge, may have allowed this to happen. He kind of backed down from that. He recanted a little bit, as we were talking about before. Now he's come back and kind of reaffirmed some of those claims. Tell us about this interview and what was said.
I think the deal with Jesse is he's a rock and roll musician, so he's not used to this world. And when he comes out and is honest about what he saw, which is, by the way, Muslims, the same shooters that did the shooting, they're all day in the venue, looking at people strangely, security guards not doing their normal job, which is guarding the back door, all of this strange behavior very early. So the narrative that they just sort of stormed in and started shooting people, no. The joint was being cased, and they were in there for a reason. You know how shows go when you're the band. You do sound check. No one's allowed in. The back door must be shut. He noticed, by the way, when he was running out that the back door had been propped open. There was all this unusual behavior. Now, I don't know why he recanted. I should have asked him about that, I guess. But I think what happened was he had managers and agents and labels going, "What are you doing? Don't talk about that." And he went, "What? Okay, sorry." And I think he went, "Wait a minute, I'm not sorry." And when we spoke, he went back to story A, the original version of events, which is indisputable, which is someone there was in on it. And I think what happened was, and we're seeing this all over the Western world, no one wanted to be bigoted. So they wanted to have a large percentage of Muslim employees at this place to look cool. Even though the Bataclan is a Jewish venue, they were already putting themselves at risk by hiring these scumbags.
And he also made this comment, which I found interesting, because this is something I've reported on. Quote, "A day after at the stadium, Muslims booed the moment of silence, and we barely heard about it in the press. I saw Muslims celebrating in the street during the attack. I saw it with my own eyes in real time. How did they know what was going on? There must have been coordination." So again, that goes to the possibility of prior knowledge, but it also goes to the fact that after Brussels, Belgium's vice prime minister came out and said that he admitted that Muslims were celebrating in the streets after the attack on the Brussels airport and metro. We had a similar thing. A teacher blew the whistle on some Muslim students in his class were celebrating the Brussels attack. So what does it say about, the state of multiculturalism and integration in Europe, that Muslims are out on the streets celebrating these ISIS massacres? I guess Hug a Muslim wasn't much success, right?
No, well, it's two things, and they're equally sinister here. One is that Muslims who know what happened and can see it with their own eyes go, "Yay, you blew up a bunch of infidels." Two is there's some who already knew. Now, I've seen French people in Paris talk about they were outside and they thought it was fireworks. So even if you are a Muslim and you hear that sound, why do you instantly know that infidels are being killed inside? Unless there was talk going around the community that there was going to be an anti-infidel attack. And we know that the soccer stadium was attacked at the same time. 140 people died that day. Only 89 were at the Bataclan. And when you have that many people being attacked, you know that there's multitudes of people providing arms, coordinating the attacks. It goes out from there. And then when the police, by the way, the police in Paris are on the same page as us. They are pissed off. It's only the Parisian citizens that have swallowed this multicultural crap. But they look at Les Banlieues, the satellite suburbs around Paris, 420 mosques, 100% of them had jihadist recruitment material in them.
And they found a bunch of weapons there as well. And with the police, this is correct. This also came up in the interview, I believe. They were told that there was some kind of hostage situation, which is why there was a delay in the response, correct?
Well, I have heard, and Jesse didn't confirm this publicly, but I have heard through my connections there that the cops actually went out assassinating jihadists. There was guys that they were suspicious of, that they knew they were involved, and they went there and shot them point blank because they knew any other way would just be a slow burn and they wouldn't get their bad guys. I've heard the same thing with Katrina, too, that a lot of detectives will take advantage of this time to take out repeat offenders. I'm not sure how I feel about that, actually.
No, I mean, this is a huge interview. I think I'm going to do an article on this. This is his quote. "There's no denying the terrorists were already inside and they had to get in somehow. During the shooting, I went outside and the backstage door was propped open. How did that happen?" So it's just interesting how he's now come back and basically reaffirmed what he saw in the first place. He had to say, well, yes, I don't know 100% for sure that the Muslim security had prior knowledge, but he's basically retelling what he said in the first place. And it's extremely interesting, especially given what's happened last night. The flight out of Paris, again, hug a Muslim, didn't seem to work. This is another attack on French people as well as the other nationalities on that plane. I think there were about 15 French people now dead. It looks like a terrorist attack. Have you been following this Egypt Air story?
Yes, and once again, what are we getting from the West? Total capitulation. Oh, it could have been some sort of electrical failure. Please, please don't face the truth. And that's because we are wimps now. And this is the ultimate weapon that terrorists use. They use our fear. They use our fear of Islamophobia. Rotherham was using it for a child prostitution ring. The police are too scared to prosecute them. The best weapon that ISIS has is our own innate insecurity about our culture. And that's what's nuts about these lefties is they're cannibalizing each other. They're trying to erase the male patriarchy. But when they're in control, they're the ones attacking each other. And when they look to a system, it ends up being way more sexist, racist, homophobic, archaic than ours. The white male patriarchy was working fine. And when you push it out, you replace it with this. Everything you hate times 1,000.
And now you've got women and feminists in Cologne immediately after the mass molestation going to the migrant camp and handing out roses. I mean, how do you explain that, Gavin? Is it trauma bonding? Is it Stockholm syndrome? Is it because it's more comfortable to delude yourself and think that this isn't a problem than to actually recognize it?
It's virtue signaling. You know, a lot of people are denying that the Bataclan even happened. I on my video on Rebel Media where I put it up, it's got as many dislikes as it does likes because these people are saying it's all a lie, it never happened. And I honestly think it just doesn't fit in their millennial brains. They go, no, this can't be it. Yes, it can be, okay? If your brain can't handle bad behavior from Muslims, just look at the raw evidence of, say, honor killings in Britain with Pakistanis. Look at them throwing acid in their daughter's face. Just that. Is that my fault? Is that my imperialism? Is that OPEC throwing that acid in their face? No. It's a religion that is plagued with inbreeding and is led by with verses more primitive than the Old Testament. We have a 2.0 with Christianity. The Quran is an ancient barbaric text, and these inbred Muslims are following it. It's a recipe for disaster. And the fact that we are laying out the red carpet for this because we feel so horrible about ourselves is, I mean, it's the apocalypse.
I mean, that's the point, isn't it? Western imperialism isn't to blame for the fact that, still 10, 11 Muslim countries execute gay people. That's got nothing to do with the invasion of Iraq.
Why is it a given that Western imperialism was bad? Why is it a given that colonizing India was to their detriment? I thought Britain built beautiful infrastructures there. We just accept that white people going somewhere must have made it worse. I don't know. Haiti seems to be doing a lot worse since they kicked us out. Jamaica seems to be doing a lot worse since independence. I can't think of a place that kicked out white people and benefited from it.
Well, no, they equate that kind of ancient colonialism with modern day imperialism, which of course is now based around attacking and regime changing secular leaders who are actually fighting against the Islamists, people who are not perfect, but people like Saddam Hussein, Bashar al-Assad, Muammar Gaddafi. That's the modern version of imperialism, and that's actually playing into the hands of the Islamists. They again conflate that with the British coming into India and other places like that, as you just pointed out. Let's move on, though, because we're running out of time here. I wanted to talk about Vice Media. Of course, you were the co-founder of Vice Media. You left due to creative differences. In the years since, we've seen Vice kind of take a noticeable left turn. They're devolving into, a certain morass of SJW pandering. Was this, from what you know, a deliberate editorial decision? Why did Vice suddenly seem to flip so quickly into covering these kind of SJW angles?
Well, I mean, it's conjecture at this point because I'm not there, but I handled almost all the content back then, and it was relatively controversial, and it wasn't so much about a right-wing agenda or some sort of conservative plan. It was to keep it interesting. Everyone in the media was doing the Obama ass-kissing thing, so I said, let's do the opposite of that. And eventually the sales team got sick of going against the grain because it's not as profitable. So after I left, the sales team took over the editorial. And if you want to make money, you want to generate